Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to answer a LinkedIn question. So this is going to be a challenging question to answer. It is a long question, so I'm not going to read the entire thing on here, but I'll put a picture up. I'm going to try to summarize this as best as I can without reading the entire thing. If you want to see my written responses, it is on LinkedIn, on the group as well. I'll put a link below to the actual discussion itself. These are really hard to answer though because they're such long questions and because there's so many nuanced details. And because there are realistically in the real world, right, so many factors, both on the personal level as well on the industry level, as well on your colleagues and corporation level, there's all these different factors playing in, and it makes it challenging to really answer these without covering every single detail. And often, even if I have these discussions in person with somebody, which I can give you a lot better response because we're having a conversation instead of me just talking to a camera or, writing on my keyboard on LinkedIn. Even then, it's better, but I still have all these ideas and thoughts afterwards, and it's hard to put it all together, but we're going to give it a shot. So kind of the crux of this problem here is somebody's asking, they went to undergrad, they got a computer science degree with another friend of theirs. They're all chatting in a group, and basically it came out to, the guy's working a lot of really long hours. He ended up getting a master's in entertainment arts with a game engineering concentration. So basically they do OS level optimization and game engine development using C++. So he's a game programmer. Anyways, so they were kind of talking about, he has this job, it's a lot of long hours, but this individual is really happy and really excited about what they do and they really enjoy it, even though it requires a lot of work. And then the question's kind of coming up onto quant finance, right? Do you see a lot of value in it? Do you see a lot of meaning in it? Do you get burned out and kind of lose value? And there's a quote in here, I believe somewhere about, making the rich richer when you work at a hedge fund, right? So what is kind of the drive for it? It feels kind of like this meaningless, hollow kind of career or industry. And then if you're working long hours on top of that, right, it's not going to be a super exciting, career-driven thing here. So to boil all this down here, really we're talking about enjoyment of the job itself, looking at value, looking at meaning, trying to get that fulfillment of it. So to start off with here, right, I mentioned this in my LinkedIn post as well. The short answer is I think everybody feels this at some point in their career. If you ask somebody and they say, I've never felt that, I'm going to question you a little bit here, especially if you're younger, because if you're younger, it's not that you don't fully understand, you just haven't had enough time to really sit and bake in a career at a point where it's you understand the highs and the lows. So I have felt this in many jobs I've had. So I've worked in a whole other industry. As many of you know, if you've listened to my podcast, I worked in manufacturing. I did manual labor, accounting, corporate finance, marketing analytics, web design, and a bunch of other stuff, all in this other career in a completely different industry. And there were times when I felt like this is not a good use of my time. And we're not making good progress, and are we really impacting anybody in a positive way? And yet now when I'm looking back at this, I've been out of it for, 7 years now, something like that. I think it's about 7 years. I've been out for 7 years. So looking back on 7 years, I'm like, wow, that was so meaningful of an experience. I learned so much. We helped so many customers. They provided great products to them. I got instant feedback. They loved things. Our customers hated us. They didn't like it. And then we fixed things and we made it better and they were happy. And so you've got this really good positive feedback from it. And one of the key points, I think, one of the struggles you're going to see specifically in quantitative finance is often we are building models. So again, I don't consider traders quants. I'm not going to go into that as a whole other discussion on satisfaction and all that. But quants are the guys that are building some sort of model that's going to be used for strategy, that's going to be used to make money, or it's going to be used to avoid, losses or risk management in some sorts there. And a lot of times you build all these, but you don't actually see your impact or your customer. So I'm going to try to take this from two perspectives here so we can kind of get some understanding of what's going on with this and trying to understand finance better. Say you're on the buy side here. So buy side is going to be hedge funds and whatnot, right? You're going to view it, at least this individual viewed this somewhat, and I can see where they're coming from. It seems like when you work at a hedge fund, right, you're just managing rich people's money and you're making rich people richer, and the world's a terrible place, and rich people are bad, evil villains. I know a lot of people have this perspective. I do not share this. So especially not in the United States, where opportunity is what kind of provides you wealth. And being good at something, being successful at something, making things happen is extremely valuable, and you should get compensated for that. So that's kind of one piece of it, which I'm not going to get too much in because people get their feelings hurt. And it's a whole other discussion to have an entire, half-hour video on. But you have to look at it from the flip side as well, right? So you think about, okay, these rich people are buying assets through hedge funds, and the hedge funds buying and selling. Often these hedge funds do provide liquidity. If you're an algorithmic trading firm, a lot of times you're actually just doing market making, which provides liquidity specifically. Again, other hedge funds, though, that are doing long-term strategies are going to be buying and selling and moving assets as well. And you want people involved in the market. You want people incentivized to buy and trade things based on some sort of value. So one, it keeps the actual prices in check, so you don't have some random inflationary, or lack of information adjustment in the stock prices or your asset prices. But the other flip side is you have to think about who is buying and selling on the other end of it. And it's not going to be a zero-sum game. I cannot emphasize this enough to people. Let's say an individual, we'll say it's a lady. We'll say, her name is Maria. We'll just make this up. Let's say she's 55 and she just retired, right? She's done. She's, done with all that. She needs to, though, cash in on all that money she saved over the years. And of course, it got put into a 401k from her employer, or she saved it and bought stocks and bonds and a bunch of other assets. She needs to liquidate those, but she doesn't want to sell all of them at once. She wants to sell them over a, 20, 30, 40-year period, however long she thinks she's going to live. And so she's going to slowly liquidate these assets, right? She needs somebody that's going to buy those assets from her, and she doesn't want to get taken advantage of. So again, the first key here is you need a competitive market. So that's a key kind of thing that you need here in capitalism. If you have a competitive market, she'll get the fairest price possible. If that asset is not very liquid and no one's really trading it, your prices aren't going to adjust very well, and she could get taken advantage of. And so that's not a very good situation on her end. On the flip side, right, she's needing cash, so she's trying to sell these things out. Again, hedge funds, algorithmic trading firms, if they're providing liquidity or they're even just buying assets because they think it's a good value and they want to hold it for their client for the next 5, 10 years or the next month or week or whatever, that's great. But let's say Maria here just needs that money right up front, so she's going to sell it and she's going to get cash for that. So that's like where you start seeing, okay, it's starting to help people. And when you start making like stories up and you put a whole realistic scenario together, you realize like, oh, she has kids and grandkids and she wants to use this money to go visit them. And, you can make up some sob story and how it really helps her out if you wanted, if that makes you feel better. But at the end of the day, there is value added in this. And I think a lot of times it is challenging to see that. And I made another video, which I will put in the comments or in the description below, perhaps, on trying to see the value in finance. Again, I could talk about this for, 10, 20, 30, 40 hours straight and still not cover everything and still not convince people, just because it's hard to show every single aspect of this. Again, especially if you're on the outside looking in, you don't see things from the same perspective. So that's an example of how hedge funds do create value. Again, though, as a quant, a lot of times you're building a model, you don't even see the trades, the executions, or even the profitability. And then you're so far back, you're not even going to know or see who's the client on the other end of that trade and how it's helping them or benefiting them. And yes, of course, people buy things and lose money. But the majority of people are going to be looking like at investments and those sorts of assets. Like, it's long-term planning for the majority of people. They're not day trading in their basement or on their phone on, Robinhood. But the thing is that it's going to provide some value to society, and you have to pay someone to do that, okay? So that's why you see it on the buy side. Now, the sell side, I think, is a lot easier to see it on. So for me, mentally, you're talking about this struggle and finding meaning and value in a career. I've had the exact same thoughts, so please don't view this as me like kind of demeaning the person asking the question or anyone that has the same idea here, because I've had similar thought process here where I'm like, okay, I'm on the sell side, I work in banking. Should I go to the buy side? It seems more exciting. Perhaps they would value, quantitative research more than the sell side does. Maybe there's all these different advantages in a career. And then, of course, the negative thought comes up of like, are they really adding value? Would I really find it meaningful? Right? I don't really know if I would find it as meaningful as being on the sell side. But of course, there's a whole list of issues with the sell side, which I'm not going to go into in this video. But the sell side, I think, is a lot easier to see the value created here. So just as an example here, right? You can say like a mortgage or like an auto loan, for example. They're easy examples to see. Let's say somebody, needs a loan for, let's say, a car, right? So they're going out to buy a car. And again, you can make these customer stories that are real world stories that I've actually seen at my actual job when you actually kind of work with those that work on the call centers, for example, that grant like extensions. So somebody falls behind on a payment, for example, right? They're behind on a payment. Let's say they bought a car, it was a used car, the transmission went out, and they needed to have money to fix the transmission, right? But they don't make enough money to pay for the transmission repair. So they have two options here, okay? They can pay for the transmission, miss their car payment, and drive their car and hope it doesn't get repossessed. Okay, it's not a very good situation. Or they can make the car payment, but then they have no transmission, so they can't drive the car, so they can't get to their job, so they're going to lose their job and they can't pay for the car or the transmission, right? So now you're like, okay, this person's in a really bad situation. What should they do? Okay, you call the bank and you say, hey, this is the situation. I need an extension. You explain, everything that's going on. And banks have a model. So again, quants build these models. And they use some, of course, judgment calls on the customer service side as well. There are models that look at aspects of the loans, the payments, missed payments in the past, and a bunch of other factors. And they figure out if you're eligible for an extension. And in this case, right, this actual example here that I'd seen, the agent's like, you're eligible for an extension. So what we'll do, you go ahead and pay for the transmission. You drive the car. Don't worry about this payment. All we're going to do is take your timeline of payments and shift them by 1 month. So you pay for it, you fix the car, and then you just pay us an extra month, which is going to be the equivalence of like you just skipped this month and we just gave you forgiveness. So that's called an extension. Again, you can see though in these real world scenarios, it adds a lot of value. But again, coming from the quant side, it can be extremely challenging to see how you're adding value, right? It feels like a lot of times you're just building models, you're going through the motions, corporations don't value who you are or your job or your responsibilities. And this can lead to you feeling burnt out, feeling like you're wasting your time. This is a terrible career. And so it's kind of a challenging position to be in. And often we feel like, why even do this? Why not go and do something else? And I've had this exact thought continually throughout my career at different points, trying to figure out, is it worth it? Is it worth my time, worth my effort? Am I adding real value to society? Or should I do something more exciting, more fulfilling that kind of fills that gap and kind of that, making some fulfillment or meaning in my life? Okay, and there's also going to be a whole other perspective. So as I mentioned, there are so many points, stances, perspectives to look at here on how you think about this, things to consider. The other thing is going to be opportunity cost. So go back to economics here, right? 101. What is your opportunity cost? So let's say you're out working as a quant, you're providing some value, you see that you provide some value, but the question you really have is, could you provide more value or better value or more enjoyment for yourself while providing value, doing something else? Right. So again, that's a very personal discussion or decision to have. And often there are really awesome careers out there. So for you guys know, right, I run a YouTube channel, I run a podcast. I often wonder, right, it's not surprising, or at least it shouldn't be, like what would happen if I just quit my day job and just went out and did YouTube and podcasting full time and invested all of my time into creating Udemy courses and perhaps writing a few textbooks and doing all this, right? It sounds a lot more enjoyable for me personally, but then it starts, right, there's other things to think about. Like, okay, I'm not going to get as much of an industry perspective. Perhaps I don't need an industry perspective at this point because I've been doing this for so long. But again, right, there's also this financial contribution piece of, can I add enough value to society in a sense of a more capitalism market system to actually pay my bills, right? I have to think about the monetary side as well, right? It's a whole other story doing something on your own, whether it's trading on your own or whether it's starting your own business and doing content creation or something like that. Again, I envy those people that are, brave enough to just jump out and do these sorts of things. But at the same time, there's a piece of me that really wants to give back to the industry. And again, being in the industry, fighting it out with people constantly at work, at conferences and other things, and trying to force the conversation and get people to look at things differently and try to improve the industry as a whole. That's a lot of what drives me, even though you deal with a lot of nonsense and crap, and it happens all the time. It's not enjoyable. But again, looking at those opportunity costs, looking at where I would be happier, looking at where I'd be more successful, looking at compensation, there's all these factors that tie into it. So these are things to consider. And this last point is all about basically you making a decision or kind of your personal passions or hobbies, right? A personal introspection on why you think something is valuable or meaningful, and is the grass greener on the other side. And what I mean by this is that often, right, you can have someone doing a job that, you view as like the most worthless, meaningless job out there. And so in this example, I think you can use the gaming example here. A lot of people have the perspective that video games are a huge waste of time. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money, right? You just sit in your parents' basement and you play video games and you're like, I don't know, some overweight slob, eating pizza on a couch in your underwear playing, I don't know, Halo or Call of Duty or something like that. So again, there's a really negative perspective. Now imagine you have that perspective and you're a video game developer, right? Like your career is not very meaningful. You're wasting your time making terrible garbage product. But you have to look at it on the flip side too as well, right? Okay, so you can look at it from a very negative perspective, but you're also providing a lot of value to people. So I'm a huge video game fan in general, and I play all kinds of platforms, for example. But thinking about like, okay, it has stress reduction, so I use it to just reduce stress, right? I like to play video games. It's a good kind of social interaction as well. I have friends that get together when we go back home to my hometown, and we get together and we play video games until like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 in the morning sometimes. It's a good bonding experience. We chat, we make fun of each other, and we play video games. Again, fun activity to do. It also increases hand-eye coordination, which I know some people think is odd, but there is actual research on surgeons, for example, who played video games, and then they looked at different dexterity measures or whatnot. I don't know, I'm not an academic researcher on this, but there are papers written on this that it enhances that hand-eye coordination as well. So there are benefits of playing video games. It's entertainment as well, right? Everybody needs some break, a downtime to have a healthy, well-balanced life. So again, providing that and creating video games is pretty cool. Again, I think though on this example they've talked about, right? If you can see the game that you created and you can talk to people that you know that play the game, or other people on forums and YouTube videos that are chatting about your game, right? You're really close to that product. You're like right there understanding how the work that you're doing is making an impact, and you can see the instant feedback. For quants, though, a lot of times we're so disconnected, and even on like hedge funds and trading platforms and all that, right? You're so disconnected even from, like, you're slightly disconnected from traders and profitability, and you get some metrics, but you might not be tracking these so closely. And then again, you don't even see your other counterparty on the other side. And so the issue that you have is that you just never see that interaction. And even for myself on the sell side here in the banking industry, it's rare to ever listen to a customer call like I've been able to do. It was part of a validation I worked on. But again, you don't see that. So I'm so far disconnected. A lot of times it seems like you're just building stats models and going through the motion, and we're doing the same nonsense over and over. And a lot of times you have a corporate issue where they're not innovating and growing and learning. And I think that's a key aspect of what company you work for, because it helps add meaning to your job and your life as well. But again, you start to add kind of this personal perspective on what you think is valuable, what you think is worth your time. Okay. So that's part of it. So again, if you think it's valuable and you really enjoy finance or statistics and mathematics. So for me, I kind of like finance. It's interesting. I studied it in undergrad. I did it for a while. But I absolutely love statistics. That's why when I get to work and I have conversations on stats and math models with my colleagues, what really drives me, what really excites me as a quant is doing research and kind of talking about different types of models and how things get put together. Now, again, if I was chasing this purely for the money, so kind of covering this perspective as well, I see a ton of people, especially in other countries, that get really, really excited about being, a quant. And I put it in air quotes here because the definition that people use is so broad and varying. It covers almost everything. But they just view it really as like a high-paying job in finance, and that somehow they're going to go out, they're going to be this big shot, they're going to live in New York City, they're going to make millions of dollars, it's going to be so easy, and life is going to be awesome. And then they get there and they realize you have to grind and do a lot of work, and then you compete with people for the same jobs like me who just do it because I love it, right? It's fun, it's exciting, I love doing statistics. And so you're really struggling to do it just to make ends meet and to get paid for your career, your job or whatnot, where you have people like me that are super excited and super motivated, and I just love doing it, and I want to help as much as I can. And so you end up in this situation where obviously for me, it's a lot less effort, it's a lot less work. I enjoy doing what I'm doing. Now, again, there's politics and things I can't stand, but for the most part, I like the job itself, where you're going to have other people that did it for the money, and they perhaps might even be getting paid a fair amount, but they're going to be extremely unhappy because we're talking about here, right? They don't see the value, they don't see the fulfillment. There's no meaning behind it or like life purpose behind doing this as a career. And so you basically waste a bunch of your life doing something that you don't understand from a meaning and value perspective. And so you end up extremely unhappy. Now, I'm not saying that's only people that are seeking money. Of course, there are people that think, I'm a pretty good example of this as well. Someone who loves statistics or math or computer science or whatever, and you're so involved in it and you're so passionate about it, And then you get into an industry that utilizes it, and a lot of times they dumb things down. They try to automate things to the point where it doesn't add a lot of value, but other people don't see that because they're not very excited. They're not very passionate as you are in the career. And so in a sense, you can be so excited and so motivated that it essentially kind of rots out your passion and desire to work for it, because the people around you in these corporations a lot of times don't have that same desire. So these are all things to think about. These are all things to talk about. So I'd love to see people discuss this in the comments, or you can go over to the LinkedIn group. I'll put something below as well. And you can add on there your experiences if you've worked in the industry, or if you've worked in a different industry, if you have some experience with this, and just kind of chat about this, because I definitely see this in the quant finance industry, that people go into it. They think it's going to be one way. They don't really like the material, or they're so excited and passionate about it that things kind of fall short. And so you end up in this position where you're extremely unhappy. So what to do about that? I don't know, guys. I'm not a life coach on this for you. But it's a challenging decision to make. It's hard to add value. And I'll cap this off with one final thought here. Business schools have done a really good job at convincing all of their students they're geniuses. They're like, I don't know, really amazing people from the core, right? You went to this business school, right? And they pat you on the back, and they have so much confidence that they enjoy doing the jobs and think that their job is meaningful no matter what. A lot of these people, at least. And so I see a lot of happiness in those that get MBAs because of this like training and education. I don't know if it's real beneficial, but I mean, it could help you have a more enjoyable career. I guess in a way you see the value because they've driven it into you for so many years that you think you're the most valuable person or the most important person. Now, being narcissistic and being so self-centered and self-focused, I don't think is a good advantage in life. But again, in this scenario here, it would be a good advantage in the sense that you'd at least feel like you're doing something of value or of meaning. So anyways, if you guys like this conversation, if you like this feedback, join the LinkedIn group. I'll put a link below, as I mentioned. If you found this video helpful, you can donate to my Ko-Fi channel. It's $3 for a coffee. It just helps actually finance buying equipment like the camera that I'm shooting on now, or my microphones and laptops. Buy books, for example, for book reviews and those sorts of things. It'll really help me out. Give me a thumbs up as well, or subscribe below if you like this content, because I will just keep generating more of this as I've done for the past, I think, like 5+ years now. So anyways, thanks for watching. And as always, until next time.